Hey, what's your theory on people drinking water? Like, do you understand? Are you aware of how much? And this is not just our current staff. This is the staff I've observed for the past decade. They drink during the day, they probably drink a gallon of water.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was some studies that I kind of looked at. Basically, dehydration is not good for you, right? So being well hydrated is good for you. It sharpens your mind, keeps those kidneys nice and clean. It's good as long as you're not drinking however many gallons to get toxicity. It's okay. So the new thing is to drink water. I'd rather than be drinking water than Coca-Cola or Diet Coke or whatever they used to drink, because that's how it used to be. People always just drink soda. So I think it's a win.
Fine. It's just, to me, it's like breathing really fast, unnecessarily. Somebody says, "Oh, you got to get more oxygen." Okay. And I'm just going to breathe real fast all day. I'll get more oxygen, but you're really not doing any benefit. So
Well,
they drink all day long, and they're going to the bathroom all day long. And it's like, I actually don't want to go to the bathroom because it's a disruption to me. And if I drank as much as they did, I would be going to the bathroom all day long.
I hear you. I mean, the evidence I think is on their side that dehydration isn't like, it's not like keto or fasting. When you fast, you still drink water, right? Like you need water. Water's good.
But you don't need that much water. So like they drink a gallon a day.
I mean, we could look this up. Like
I kind of skimmed it. They drink a
CDC
gallon a day.
Yeah.
And I drink, if this
Water
cup
a
has
day.
10 ounces of water during the day, I drink about 2 to 6 ounces of water. Think about it. They drink a gallon. I don't even know how many ounces that is. 128. I don't know.
I think
It's a lot.
Okay, the National Academy of Medicine suggests an adequate intake of daily fluids of 13 cups and 9 cups, so men and women. Women need less. 1 cup equals 8 ounces. So they need about, a lot of cups there, a lot of ounces. Also, these folks are talking all day. You know,
So am I.
you get insensible loss. I think they talk more than we do. Don't you?
Fine.
I think they talk more. And so their insensible losses
Are
are
you
higher.
drinking? Or do you have one of these cups that you're drinking out of constantly?
No, I do tea. I do like herbal tea in the mornings, maybe in the afternoon, but usually I'll have a small cup of water in the afternoon.
Okay.
But I don't do a gallon.
Do you see what they have? You don't. Do you
Use
see
these Stanleys.
Stanley, and they make multiple runs up to the kitchen to refill it every day. They say it'll last. This will last me about. They'll hold up this massive Stanley cup. I go, how long is that going to last you? Probably about 3 hours.
Okay.
And I go, what?
So wait,
I'm astounded.
2.7 liters, 2 gallons. I'm like, so these conversions. Yeah, I mean, women need about 0.71 gallons. Men, I think about 1 gallon. But
A
I don't know if
day.
that counts, per day. Every source is going to give you a different number. It's nutrition science, right? It's messy. I don't think they're hurting themselves.
I don't think they're hurting themselves. I just think they're doing something that is not necessary. It's like breathing too fast to me.
Yeah.
It's like, so there's a pseudoscience. So I actually asked one of them the other day, let me ask you, did you grow up doing this or is this something you learned to do?
Yeah.
And I was surprised. The one person I asked that she said, actually, I've been doing this as long as I can remember. I go, oh, okay, fine.
That's rare. I think most kids don't like water because it's boring. When I was a kid, I didn't drink that much water.
It's
I
fascinating.
drink Gatorade and crap. I don't know.
If I-
Ovaltine.
If I had to talk to a nephrologist, this is what I would ask them. Anyway.
We should do that. Okay. So this is a good intro.
All right, Max, what are we talking about on today's podcast, episode 6?
Episode 6. Yeah. So I want to talk about work culture. I think this is something that before I was in private practice, I didn't think about too much, interestingly, probably because I was working at big academic centers and your voice is so small in those settings. Whereas here in a smaller place, you just have more feedback and you can really see how the chess pieces move. And so obviously you have a lot of experience developing, changing work culture. And so I'd love to hear from you and just walk through different scenarios and then talk about different examples in corporate business of people developing work culture, changing work culture, and keeping their work culture. So with no further ado, I guess one thing, if you're an ophthalmologist or in medicine, one thing I'd like to know, or people would probably want to know, is how do you think you start a practice and build a culture within that practice? So you're starting from scratch. In our last episode, we talked a lot about kind of the nuts and bolts of, getting the gear, finding your ambulatory surgical center, negotiating for retail space, blah, 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 blah. That's great and all, but if you don't have a good work culture, I think it all kind of falls apart.
So your question to me is, how do you start it from scratch?
How would you start it from scratch? And, what's some pearls you could give? And then we'll kind of work our way backward into your experience, which I think is more taking something that wasn't ideal from your perspective and making it more ideal here at Austin Eye. Or we could start that way and work forward, whatever works for you, whatever you think is most organic.
I don't have any personal experience starting a culture from scratch. My personal story is, my recollection is on my educational pathway, I identified personalities that I liked of people who were above me, my attending physicians, maybe students or residents who were above me, and you learn good things, good habits, and you learn habits to avoid. And then at least I joined the practice, and my mind was open. I had my own personal biases, but I assumed that they had everything figured out.
Right, because you're joining in 1997, but Austin Eye was founded in 1969?
Correct.
Okay, so that's like what, 28 years old practice?
Yes.
So that should be pretty matured and the gear should be flying, running smoothly, right? That's your expectation.
Right. And to me it was, because compared to where I came from,
Sure.
it was better. But over my lifetime, I've learned from mentors, most of whom I've actually just watched online through podcasts or YouTube. Hey, these are better ways of approaching other human beings and interacting with them. And that art of learning how to listen,
Right.
communicate. It's even like a video I saw the other day. He said, I felt, and this is what I did. So it's that if somebody comes to you with a problem, you go, I felt that way in the past. I've been there before. I know how you feel. And this is what I did when I was in that same position. It's that listening, empathy, but also kind of learning how to engage with people and help solve problems together. It's a constant process, but I just learned that online from other people.
So it's interesting. You said you took things that you were learning as you were training. And again, you were in academic settings. So these are hospitals, universities, right? And you're learning mostly about the practice of medicine, right? And I guess a little bit about leadership. But then you found, and in theory, these folks maybe shouldn't be as savvy at the business aspect since they're not running it themselves. The university runs the clinic or what have you. Then you get out into private practice and you find something interesting that actually private practice seemed behind in some ways in terms of the culture. Is that right? Am I hearing you
No,
right?
I thought the culture in private practice was better than the culture in my training. However,
okay.
what I
Yeah,
didn't
you did say
realize
that, yeah.
is that over the subsequent 26 years that I've been in practice, looking back, I realized the culture when I started was not nearly as good as what it has developed into over time.
So
but
you're-
not without a lot of deliberate effort.
You're comparing now to then, not then compared to each setting. I got it. I
Right. So
understand.
2024 is a lot better than 1997.
Sure. And in 1997, you mentioned looking at things on the internet. I mean, that didn't come around until maybe a decade later. So
Right.
how are you doing it in that period? How are you adjusting?
I wasn't. I was trying to build the practice.
Sure.
And I was emotionally unintelligent. Looking back.
Okay. Meaning you weren't thinking, feeling, what you just said.
I didn't understand how to interact with people as well as I do now. So I had to make a lot of mistakes. And I guess I didn't have the benefit of YouTube in the late 90s. And it wasn't really until probably for me, I was in practice 13, 14 years before it really started. My mind started waking up to, hey, I'm having to deal with these repetitive problems in our practice, our business, with people. Maybe we need to start making some changes. But also, at least for me, and every business is different, around 15 years into practice, I started having more self-confidence to express myself to the people who I was working with. And I was developing a greater sense of urgency about, I've seen these mistakes we've been making over the past decade. Let's kind of analyze that and try not to make these same mistakes dealing with people, staff, employees, hiring, et cetera, going forward. And as time has gone by, and I guess I've learned more, and maybe because I've been able to kind of develop the team around us to more suit how I'm evolving. I think it's working a lot better because I'm more aware and I have more control over the people who work here. Whereas when I started out, I was not aware, I was emotionally unintelligent, and I had no control over who came and went.
Compared to 1997, you are the only employee still at Austin Eye, correct?
1997, and nobody else is
No one
here.
else. Yeah. So you've seen cycles of all the positions
Oh, yes.
at the practice.
Oh, yes.
And that's
a learning experience in and of itself.
And then by the end of that process, you were building that team yourself. You were seeking the skills that you wanted, the personalities that you wanted.
Like when I first started out, the hiring decisions were not made by me. They were made by somebody else. I accepted the judgment of the people making the hiring decisions. And I didn't weigh in. But I would see it's almost like with patients, at least I have learned, I develop pattern recognition on the personality. I can pretty much pick up on the personality of another human probably within a minute. And it's I'm not always going to be right, but I'm going to be I will have identified their personality probably with 95% accuracy. And now with staff, I can do that as well.
During interviews and just day to day.
Because we've hired through the past 26 years of my existence, hundreds of staff that have come and gone, and I see what works, I see what doesn't work. So I have that benefit. It's like if you're dating and you kind of understand, this is really what works best with me.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's sort of maybe a high school sweetheart setup isn't the best thing. It sounds romantic and all in a way, but perhaps ill-informed, right? Yeah, and as I'm at a different stage, just even going through it here, I'm kind of starting to feel what you're describing. You need those reps. You need that time to just get your feet wet. And every time you move to a different practice, you probably have to restart that cycle a little bit. Some of the principles will be the same. You have to learn the culture that already exists and then see where you fit in it and then determine if there's anything you can do to make it better from your perspective.
So what, in judging, let's talk about, what do you want to talk about? You want to talk about present culture? You want to talk about past culture, learning experiences? Where do you want to go?
Yeah. So you mentioned the culture in sort of abstract terms, but I know from talking to you the other day that you have a good framework for what it was like at Austin I circa 1997. Do you mind sharing sort of the principles that guided the business at that time? And then can you guide us to what you feel like it is now?
Okay, when I started out, the practice was doing well. I thought it was doing well. At least that's what I was led to believe. I would say it was doing well.
Mm-hmm.
What I was unaware of is there were many practices doing better.
Mm.
So having tunnel vision or not having the humility to look around
Sure.
and see what's going on in other communities with other practices,
Mm-hmm.
that was not great. But I wanted to get busy, so I just listened to the philosophies, and some of the philosophies in the practice when I started were the patients come first. And that kind of comes along with, there was a saying, I don't know what company came up with it. It says, the customer is always right.
Right.
So, okay, that sounds right. Patients come first.
Sure.
We're here. We, the doctors and staff, are here to serve the patient. The patient comes first.
Right.
Customer is always right. Another mantra was, everyone is replaceable. And that was well intended in a spirit of humility, saying
Okay.
nobody should be thought of as too good, and everybody should be willing to chip in, and don't be too good to do anything. But the way I know it was absorbed by certain staff, it didn't sit well with them.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed insensitive
Mm-hmm.
to the value and hard work of the people on the front line.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, another saying was, it's all about the technology. So we have the best technology to offer to help our patients see the best.
Mm-hmm.
One could argue that that was accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would make great investments in technology, but what we were missing is the technology is important. But what I learned is the most valuable asset of a practice is the human capital.
Mm.
So technology is important, but the people drive everything.
Sure. It's like if I owned a NASCAR car, I don't really know how to drive that vehicle appropriately. I know how to drive, but I'm not really maximizing that. Whereas if you get the right skill set person, my friend Patrick, who's a NASCAR driver, you put him in that car, makes more sense. Basically what I'm saying, you can tee up and build all this infrastructure, but if you don't have the skill set in your staff or whatever to back that up, it's kind of meaningless.
Right. And if you're the owner of, let's say you're, I don't know, Roger Penske, I don't know if he's still alive, or Joe Gibbs, they used to own David Letterman, these racing teams.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they said to the pit crew and the drivers, the fans are the most important thing.
Right.
Do you think that's going to incentivize the pit crew and the driver to excel?
No, they're going to make it flashy and look good and slow down. And it'll be about how the car looks, not how it performs, in my mind.
In reality, it is about the team. So it's about the driver. It's about the pit crew. If I'm Jerry Jones, is it all about the fans or is it about the players? I would say that if the players and the management and the coaching staff don't feel like they're the priority, they're not going to perform.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't perform, then the fans are not coming.
I mean, it sounds like what you're saying to me, it kind of goes against like human altruism. Like basically, if we emphasize an other person instead of our staff, you know, we'd like to think they'd put it all in for them, but maybe people respond better when they're the focus.
I found that it is about the most important element in our organization are the human beings in the organization. We have a lot of technology. We have a lot of infrastructure. We need all those things. That's why we have IT. That's why we have service contracts on everything. But the talent and personalities and character of the human beings drives everything.
Hmm.
It's
Okay.
the most important asset to any business, really.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
And
let
how do
me
you
add
make that
let me
happen?
add one more thing
Yeah.
that I was told, or one more philosophy when I started out. It was a very top down organization where what the management said, the staff are supposed to fall in line with that.
Sure.
And I understand that. But in retrospect, that was not the best way to do things.
Hmm.
So when I'm beginning, it's I have no I'm the new guy. And whenever you're the new person, new guy, new gal, you have to earn the ability to influence others over time.
Right.
So part of the deconstruction process it took decades really to lead us to today would be patients do come first in the end. However, in practice, the staff comes first. We want to do everything to incentivize our staff to perform at an excellent level or an elite level. And those staff who understand the mission and are driven to excel within the organization, they add value to everything. They add value to other people in the practice. They add value to the mission in the practice and to the bottom line. And another thing I learned was actually, if you'll notice during our office meetings, do I say much?
No.
Which is good.
Right.
Our office meetings used to be all driven by the senior doctors.
Right.
I've learned it's more effective for me to say less. They say it's a form of what is known as decentralized command.
Mm-hmm.
And they say culture is the ultimate form of decentralized command.
Mm-hmm.
So because we have people who are very important to our organization who've been with us a long time and they understand the mission, they run the meetings.
Yes.
And I usually don't have to say anything. I might say
Sure.
one paragraph, 4 sentences. That's pretty much it. And if I have to say nothing, that's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
So I've learned to have the leaders that have proven themselves in our organization over time. They basically take charge. They take ownership for the decisions they make. They do run them by me, and I'll say sounds good most of the time. If it doesn't sound good,
Mm-hmm.
then I might go, hey, maybe we should think about doing it another way. But if they have buy-in on what they want to do, they'll get behind it. It's better than if I say, do it my way. They won't have buy-in on that concept, and they don't feel empowered. So the more I can empower our staff, I think the better off we are in terms of building a better culture.
And that takes time, right? You had to train these folks years ago, right? And give them the skills and the confidence and the perspective so that they could do that, have that leadership capability. So how do you do that? How do you
I think it's
imbue them?
You identify talent. So let's say there's a person I'm thinking of now in our practice, and she is on top of things. She seems focused, driven, shows a lot of hustle. Patients like her.
Mm-hmm.
She seems to have integrity. If that person stays with us, then that person has the character attributes that we want to retain. So we give her more responsibility. We train her
Right.
to do other things. And if they stay with us, they become more capable. So, the people who are in the leadership positions in our office, they've typically been with us at least 5 years.
Right.
And they're super capable. You ask them anything, they kind of go, they know
Yeah.
everything.
It's incredible.
And that's value. That's super valuable to me. I'll say it. I mean, I'd rather overpay them than underpay them to retain them because they're so valuable. I could, if I were purely numbers driven, I could say, oh, I could. How much am I paying this staff member? Maybe I'm overpaying them. Maybe I can find a younger person and pay them less. I don't really think like that. I think if a person's adding value, they're adding so much value to the business. They more than justify their presence here on a daily basis. But it's up to that individual to prove that every day, and I'll see that over time. They will self-identify themselves. On the flip side, you'll have those people who you can tell they want what's in it for them, and they're typically associated with some element of drama on a recurring basis, and they self-identify themselves. And if I'm about that, I will retain those types of people. But if I'm not about that, those types of people will not likely be incentivized to stay in our organization because we don't share the similar values. Like I know some businesses where every human's personality is different.
Sure.
A lot of humans are very emotional, as we know.
Sure.
So think about it. I tend to be more, we're all emotional, but I would consider myself wanting to be more even-tempered, more detached. There's the other spectrum. I'll admit it. I don't go out of my way to recognize everybody's birthday. I don't go out of my way to recognize if you've been here 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, but I'll go out of my way if you've been here 5 years. I'll go out of my way if you've been here 10 years. Some people want to celebrate every day, National Best Friends Day, sister's boyfriend's birthday day, that kind of thing. I don't really, I'm focused on the mission of the organization, and I want a good culture, but I'm not hyper emotional. And there are humans who would lead with a lot of emotion, and they will attract other emotional people. And I would say good luck to them, because it is, I would say it is more of a challenge to work with people on the more emotional spectrum.
Sure.
And it is less work to work with people who are more even-tempered. That's my thesis, for better or worse. So every organization has its own personality, and that's kind of the personality that I look for.
Would you say there, you kind of said this, but just to clarify, that there is such a thing as constructive drama? You said if the drama matches me or something like that, I get along with that, or not? Is it drama? Is constructive drama just people looking out for the practice? Is that another way of thinking about it? Like, I'm concerned about X, we should do Y. And you think about it, and they present it.
I would say there is such a thing as constructive drama, but I'm very private about it. Like if I know somebody's having a problem, I won't talk about their problem with other people.
Sure.
I'll focus one-on-one with the individual who's having a problem, and I want to support that person to an extent.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can't get involved in everybody's personal life. It becomes overwhelming.
Yeah. There's something that we talked about the other day. It's, I think it's from the Harvard Business Review. And the idea is that you want to build psychological safety. So just to kind of talk more about this concept, but there is an idea that you want a workplace where people can share some things, right? You don't want them to be
Yes.
afraid of their boss or their colleagues in a way they don't feel like they have that sort of safety. Because if you don't feel that, I think that would be pretty distressing that if you couldn't share even something. So how do you balance a sense of psychological safety and traditional professionalism expressed in 1969, which would be like, just keep it to yourself. I mean, how do you fight?
There's no easy answer. I'm aware that every staff member, myself included, has personal drama occurring
Right.
every half day, 365 days a year.
Right.
Do I feel the need to share that with any of the staff members? Just on a personal level, I share almost no personal drama about what's going on in my life with anybody in the practice.
Mm-hmm.
Now, thankfully, I don't have a whole lot of drama, in my opinion.
Right.
Maybe because I try to be more even-tempered, I try not to have drama. On the other hand, I think that there are people in our office who they're more emotional, and they think that their personal problems should be shared with their close friends at work, and they feel supported by their work coworkers who become their friends. Am I okay with that? I'm okay with it.
Sure.
It's a thing.
It's a bonding strategy, right?
Yes.
And another, I'm going to drop some corporations that do things, Chick-fil-A, for example, one of their concepts is we're better together. They work together in a lot of ways. Some of it is also about the people's home lives, not all of it, but they also acknowledge that people are human and that it is a business, but there's a human element too. So you have to mitigate or manage that a bit. So this is important stuff. And this is really abstract, and maybe we're going down the rabbit hole here with that stuff, but we can, we talked a lot about that, but what are some of the values you think now encapsulate Austin, or other values that you think encapsulate Austin?
I think our staff is good at supporting one another. Mm-hmm. I think it's actually quite good at that.
Yeah.
But that's person to person. The person who, technician to technician or nurse to nurse, they're going to support one another. And that's just good human sympathy and empathy.
Right.
We're all human. I'm all for that.
So you have to pre-select, right? Like when you're hiring, that's probably the most important thing that you do, right? Like you've mentioned, you have to hire for what your culture is. Usually, that's
you have
the
to do your
easiest way.
best. You have to do your best during the interview process to identify character attributes of the person you're interviewing to see if they're a good fit.
Right. How would you detect, not to give away trade secrets, but how would you detect if someone does not have that sort of fortitude and even-keeled nature? Like, is there a question, or is it just the vibe? Like you're talking about, you meet a patient and within a minute you can tell. Do you have something formalized? How do you do that? Or is it informal? It's
I think
probably
the people who hire here understand the character traits from their own personal experience that have worked out well here.
Sure.
I think the people who hire here, they have to invest their time and energy interviewing. It's like if you're a residency program director in medicine and you're looking at applicants and you've been doing this for 10 years, based on the ones who came through and what their applications look like,
Sure.
what actually works and what doesn't work in your particular institution. Well, the people who hire here have hired a wide spectrum of individuals and have learned over time, I think, to be more selective based on what they have found works and what doesn't work. And when they make certain hires, if I don't feel, if my impressions of the people that they choose to hire are not what I love, I'll tell them. I'll tell them I probably wouldn't have hired this person or that person because I want to give them feedback. So the next time they're interviewing, they know to maybe adjust even further. So we're able to kind of fine tune
Right.
how we hire over time. It's a learning process. So it's learning over time. I guess people could go to school for this.
Sure.
But we're learning on the job. We're all learning on the job.
Right. So, okay. And then again, to bring it back to principles, what are some other things? I know there was some specific training that was done at Austin I years ago before I joined to kind of really emphasize the mission statement. That's one of the first things, when you look at all the business folks' websites and stuff, they said define the culture. So how did you define the culture in a concrete way so you could communicate that to the new hires and the folks that have been there a long time so that they got kind of what's our program? What's our mission? What are we doing?
We just want to be the best. We want to be essentially an elite team
Right.
at all levels. So
Right.
we want that to be the standard. It's almost like, I love Nick Saban, the Alabama football coach. He says, if you want to be part of our team, you have to perform to an excellent or elite standard all the time. The standard is not going to change.
Right.
And it's just those people who want to be part of the program need to either rise to that level or they just pretty much will not stay.
Right.
And that's the standard. So I think our patients want the best care.
Right.
And I want the best team to deliver that care. And that is the foundational standard. Now we can go deeper. We can talk about character attributes we look for.
Well, sure. I mean, you have something over here in front of you. Like these things, I think, are also part of your culture, right? The
right
Jocko kind of principles.
Yeah. Jocko Willink is his team at Echelon Front. They have a leadership consulting business, and they've put together, and I'll share them in the video, the 4 laws of combat, the 5 mindsets for victory. These are based on the lessons that he learned in the military, which applied to business and life. And he said, leadership is the most important thing in business and life. And I really have learned that is more true than not. So even as a friend or a spouse or a parent, your ability to be a leader within those spheres is extremely important. Things that they talk about are a lot of character attributes. Just prioritize and execute. That means you can't do it all. Prioritize what's most important and execute that. Decentralized command. That means build a good team around yourself such that you don't have to do everything and your team feels empowered. And encourage everybody to make tough decisions as long as it's in line with the mission of the organization. Simple, which is, you asked me what we're all about. We want to be an elite team at all levels.
Sure.
So if I want my eye surgery, I want to go to that practice because they have the best.
Right.
If I want to play, we'll say because we're in Austin, Texas, if I want to win a national championship in football, I want to play for UT because they have the best talent. They have the best coaching staff.
Sure.
They have the best facilities, the best alumni and fan support. We want to develop that within our own culture and organization. Cover and move is another law of combat. That means if you're out, I cover for you. If I'm out, you cover for me. But that means we have to empower one another, cross-train, build one another up. Don't operate just, this that's not my job description. That crushes me. If somebody says, when somebody is able and capable of performing a job,
Right.
but they're unwilling, that's a deal breaker for me. So if
Right.
let's say I need your help, and you go, that's not my job, but I know that used to be your job, and you know how to do it, and you say, I'm not doing that.
Sure.
Maybe you're not a good cultural fit for our organization,
Sure.
because you're more about self rather than helping others,
Right.
which is another tenet. It's always be humble enough to think like you're not too good to do anything. So in
Right.
our office, literally, if the toilet gets clogged and I've got to reach my hand in and pull out stuff to unclog it, I'll do it, because sometimes you have to lead, and sometimes that's what a leader has to do.
Sure.
They have to do the things that nobody else is wanting to do at that time. It's like I was watching a podcast today. Well, it was classic. He said, it was this guy interviewing, who was the guy? Who was the podcaster? Oh, okay. It was a podcast where they were interviewing a retired SEAL named Andy Stumpf. And he says, a lot of people are motivated, but basically they don't have the discipline to execute. And part of the SEAL screening process called BUDS is to make sure that people will always have the discipline to do what they're supposed to do, even though they don't want to do it.
Sure. Or if no one's looking.
So
kind of thing.
they said, he gave the example of, if I know that there's gunfire around the corner and I've got to go out there and address the gunfire and get in the line of fire, I'll do it. I have the discipline to do it, and my team knows I'll do it. What they don't want is somebody, when there's fire coming around the corner and I've got to go out and address it, they don't want somebody who, when they're told, we need you to cover and move for us, basically get in the line of fire so we can get across. They don't want somebody who says, I don't really feel like doing that.
Right.
Because then that's when everything falls apart.
Right.
So cover and move is a very important principle.
I think it's the most commonly cited one since I've started working here, is cover and move. I think that's the most frequently cited tenet from this list.
And you realize, I mean, like, the senior leadership in our organization will do things that they need to keep the process flowing
Yeah.
when other people are out, because people get sick, people don't feel good, people, life happens.
Yeah, I kind of think about this place sometimes like either like a small family restaurant or like my own home. You know, like if something's on the floor, you pick it up, you throw it away. If something's going on here, you talk about it, figure out how to fix it, and people get it done, instead of like, silos, not my problem, that kind of attitude, which is pervasive in other places.
In my mind, every problem here is solvable. We just need to apply the human effort or financial resources to make it happen.
Right.
Everything can be solved, but we have to have the will to do it. And that it's really just human will or financial resources. And one way or another, we'll make it happen.
And I think making people feel like each person in the organization feel like a leader in their own way, right? Receptive to feedback. And, there is an organizational chart. There are levels or whatever, but everyone should be empowered to feel like they are the master of their situation, but also flexible to be helpful to the other groups. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that's leadership, is every person should feel like a leader.
Do you think, what's your observation? Because you see things from a different lens than I do.
Sure.
How do you think the people feel like in the different departments within our organization?
I would say that they match that expectation, that I'm daily impressed by the motivation, curiosity, interest in doing better that I see in pretty much every person that works here. And it is remarkable and a testament to sort of what we've been talking about in terms of having a plan, executing that, recruiting appropriately, setting the culture, and letting people be people, letting them have responsibility, not micromanaging. There are rules and processes and stuff like that, of course, but I think people here are given a lot of trust. And
Now-
you rise to that trust, right? You rise to the level of trust, usually.
Do
People
you
want to do well.
do you engage with the staff much about, hey, how are things going, and listening to
Yeah.
concerns that they may have about work or life or personal things?
Yeah, I'm still newer, right? So I'm still in that phase where I'm still trying to figure out what is expected, what is normal, what is not. But I try to listen. I think a lot about what you do, actually, not just in staff meetings, but even like when we meet with companies that are trying to have us use a new product or whatever, you listen. So I try and think like, don't talk, just try to just be there and listen. I mean, engage with them. Like, don't be a robot and just stand there. But I try to think about that a lot. So I try to make an effort. I think I could do a better effort of getting to get that feedback. I think about that a lot upstairs in the ASC, more so than anywhere else.
Yeah, I think I think we should feed off one another, where the more we can be on the same page in terms of how we do things, basically, if we can learn to mirror the attribute, like if you have better attributes in different areas than I do, then I should steal those.
Right.
And if I have better attributes in areas that could benefit you, you should steal those.
Right.
So basically, our goal is that if we can all have the curiosity and drive to put those best attributes together in our composite personality, that's everybody wins.
That's everyone is replaceable, but spun to a more productive light. No one's right about everything.
No.
So everyone has something that they're right about. And so you should be open to other people and their ideas.
Right. I've learned that I don't think I'm 100% confident about anything. So I am willing to listen to everything. Now I have my own, I guess, sensibilities,
Sure.
but I'm open to being wrong about everything.
I'll share this.
Yeah,
This is personal, but there's someone very close in my life who one of their sayings is, "I'm always right." And people that are close to them echo that sentiment. And
That person is always right?
Always right.
Ooh.
And that really chafes against me as a person. I've never felt that is not, I don't think it's productive at all. And every time I hear it, I kind of just wince a little bit.
So that
a lot
person,
of it.
that person actually says they're always right.
Yes. And then a very close person to them also in my family agrees with that sentiment, further boosting the ego of the person who thinks they're always right. Talk about an echo chamber.
Yes.
And so I sit there and you can't argue with a person who always thinks they're right. And so it has its, you can see its fallout, when you have that kind of philosophy.
The ego. How important is the ego?
You need confidence. Confidence is key, right? And part of that is having a healthy sense of self. And I guess you could call that ego. But a healthy ego that's confident understands that is flexible. I think there's confidence in being flexible and being dynamic and rising to that adversity. That's how I think about it.
Do other people see that person who thinks they're always right, and do they find that admirable?
No.
Do you see it when they are around other people that other people realize that that person thinks they're always right?
Yes, but because of how old their bonds are to these other people, it's unbreakable, right? Like if you've been around them since you were little kids, can't just break it off at that point. If it's been decades, right? At that point, you guys are set. Like, okay, I've kind of accepted this person. But I think for newer people, if you were to spend enough time in that situation around that kind of energy, I think I've seen that it doesn't pan out well. Like it's hard to really build a bond with someone who has that opinion. Now, hold on, before I go too far, I'd say this person says that maybe behind more closed doors
Yes.
with family,
Yes.
not to every person they've ever met.
Do you think when somebody walks into a room and they think and behave like they're the smartest person in the room, do you think other people can recognize that?
Yes.
How do they? And then, okay, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Um,
But here, thinks, that was the key word, not know, right? They're wrong.
yeah, nobody's
They're
nobody's the smartest person in the room, basically.
No, never. Well, okay, they might be smart about something, but not everything, like you're saying. You're going to have your weak points. So there's always a gap. You're not perfect. And so if you think you know everything about everything, you're lying to yourself and you're kind of a fool because you're missing out on so much growth.
I feel some degree of sympathy for the person who thinks that they're the smartest person in the room. I think I call them lacking in emotional intelligence. They don't understand how I would say they don't understand how a majority of people think. Because I don't think a majority of people really, I think a majority of people can see the ego in somebody who would have that attitude.
And it's also a defense mechanism. I think it's a fragility. I think that's a weakness, right? To believe that because you feel insecure. You can't, if you're secure in yourself, I think you should be able to admit when you're wrong. It's one of the tenets on here. We didn't talk about it. Mindsets for victory, extreme ownership. I think that's admitting, no excuses, no blaming others, own all problems.
Right.
Admitting when you're wrong.
Right. So that's why quite often when I do watch politicians speaking, how often do they take ownership of the problem and go, yeah, that was my bad, my fault.
Yeah.
I'm going to do things better going forward.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. They blame,
Sure.
They point fingers, and it's somebody else's fault. And ultimately nothing gets solved because they're not owning the problem, which
Yeah.
speaks to another core attribute of people that I admire. It's humility. They say that's the most important quality of a leader, humility. And I have found that to be true because if you're humble, you're open to being influenced. Your mind is open. When we're looking for personality types, there was a book called The Talent War. One of the authors of a book called The Talent War was one of our patients, but he identified 9 core characteristics of high potential individuals. And they are, number 1, drive, which self-explanatory, I hope. Resiliency, meaning the ability to persevere in the face of challenge and bounce back from setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Adaptability,
Mm-hmm.
humility, integrity, emotional intelligence or effective intelligence, they call it. Team ability, which is the ability to function as part of a team, placing the success of the whole above the needs of the self. Curiosity and emotional strength. And really, those are the character attributes of the people we try to hire. So when we're hiring, I'm not really looking for somebody who has experience in that specific position. I'm looking for the personality traits because, as they say, you can train for skill, but you can't train for character. So you hire for character, train for skill.
Right. Right. I was thinking about this. I mean, when you have something really delicate, like I remember in residency, my class, not to pat our own backs too much, but we had minimal drama, almost none. We followed all these things. We took care of each other. It was just from day one, we just clicked and we executed the mission and we did what we needed to do. And when you have a residency class, if you're not familiar, it's basically for us, it was 7 doctors, and we were responsible for the entirety of a big institution's management of emergencies. And so you need someone who's always there, always available, doing hard things, taking care of sick patients, answering a lot of call and all this. And if someone's not up to snuff, they're not carrying their weight, it really can tumble and have big impacts on your peers, but then, more importantly, on patients too. So for us, we got lucky because it just, they hired for character, and we happened to have some skill too to back it up. But then in subsequent years, based on feedback from my colleagues who stayed along to be leadership later, once they moved through the ranks and they became chief residents, which are folks that are responsible for the younger doctors, they didn't do such a good job at hiring for character later down the road. And there was drama, and there were people that weren't willing to help out. They weren't willing to take the extra call, cover and move, help out, because they're, people are human. Some people take advantage of that too much, and they call out too much. And then when someone else has that problem, they won't reciprocate or help out. And it just starts to create a malignant spiral of people being resentful towards each other, and it's not productive. And so you don't build those bonds, and it just shreds the unity that you need to be the best, which is the whole mission of where I went for residency.
Do you think the same people were selecting the different classes? Or was it different people selecting different classes?
Oh, man. Okay, different people. The leadership changed. And so they started seeking different features and different characteristics.
It's the learning.
And the culture took a dive. Now every culture thinks that their culture is the best, right? These young kids, whippersnappers, don't know what it's like and all that. I think it's a natural human behavior, but we're talking a matter of 3 or 4 years age difference. So kind of similar
I think
people.
In any, at least in the residency training programs, I think the residency program directors do change over time. That's a maybe a 4-year position.
Yeah.
In academic centers.
For us, it was our person had been there. Dr. Getty had been there for like 20 years.
As the residency program director,
which is unique.
And he was the one involved with your year?
Yes. And then a few years after that, and then he stepped down and traded it over to some other people who are very good, but they have a different set of criteria.
And they've got to learn. They're going to make mistakes.
Sure.
They're starting from scratch.
That's true.
It's just like when I was starting from scratch, I didn't know as much either.
Or maybe they think there's some inadequacy in the way that Dr. Getty was. They might have a different vision, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. Maybe there's some strengths in what they see. I don't know.
It's
I
not
don't
a
have the big
perfect
picture.
process because you can have it all. You can have very experienced people. Let's say Dr. Getty and his team were really proficient in what they did. They still won't get it perfect.
Oh, no.
But they'll probably get it more perfect than people who are starting with less experience.
Even if those people, all of whom trained at the same place. So they knew the culture going in. So it's not like you're getting some outsider coming in and messing with things. No, these are homegrown, So that's interesting that even people who are part of your culture can change your culture, which isn't necessarily bad. It's just if you think you had a good culture already, why change it?
Learn from the mistakes of others.
And hopefully they're being reflective on that is my hope. Again, this is all secondhand knowledge. I'm not there myself, but it does ring true to me. And having lived it myself, I could see how different you really need to be. You need to be a supplicant person. You need to do, what they call servant leadership. You need to be there to be helpful, be available, being there, and your whole self being there mentally. And if you have a crew that you bring in and they're not there mentally and they're not ready to play, you're not going to win.
Yeah, if I were that team, we'll say, that was selecting a class of recruits, like you said, that had more drama when previous classes were more cohesive, less drama, then I would hope that the newer hiring staff would then look inward, take ownership, say, hey, maybe we need to reassess how we hired or how we recruited people and what character attributes we prioritized in our selection process, our interview process, and maybe ask our predecessors, hey, what did you do to avoid the drama that we're experiencing now? And that would be a learning experience. It'd be good in the end. But if the newer team says, we're just going to do it our way and we've got it down, and then they're not open to being influenced and getting better and owning maybe some areas of improvement that they could focus on in that process, then the problem will persist.
And, to give them a little wiggle room here, the way it works when you're getting quote unquote hired for these residencies is it's you go through what's called the match.
Right.
So it's a process where a computer algorithm ends up telling you who you're going to get based on preferences from you and preferences from the applicants. So it's not a direct hiring tool. It's not like how most jobs are where you show up, you hand them your application, they read it, they talk to you, and then they hire you. No, it's this very complex thing. So again, to give them a little bit of a buffer here, sometimes it's just bad luck. The robot gives you a person that maybe you weren't anticipating. So, that's my CYA.
That's a good recovery,
On
Max.
that.
Good recovery. Bascom Palmer thinks highly of you still.
Oh, God. Oh, man. Oh, this is bad. But they're actually, if we want to take a little detour just to talk about Bascom Palmer, because they are, an elite institution. They have very different, it's a very different place than here, but they have the same mission, I think, which is excellent. But they handle everything, right? We do cataract refractive. That's our game. They are covering everything. They're doing tumors, immunosuppressants for eye care, really intense medical ophthalmology issues, and then very high level surgical things too. So when they were founded in the 60s, they were fortunate enough to have Ed Norton, who founded the place, and his vision was big, and it was to make it the best from the get-go. And so he recruited for talent. That's what he went for. He went to all these places and scooped up the best and then brought them there and was like, hey, it's going to be kind of bumpy at the beginning. We're not going to have everything. We don't have all the money. Our reputation is nothing because this program's it's basically the year your dad started, maybe a few years before. So not that long ago. Meanwhile, Harvard's been around for whatever, hundreds of years. These programs are ancient, and you're going up against these guys, and you're in Miami, Florida, the middle of nowhere in the 60s. So it was a challenging thing. But again, because he selected for talent and for character, and he had a vision, they grew it big time, and they flourished. And when they built the Bascom Palmer building, where they still are now, they have 6 floors. So they knew they could fill the 4 floors at the bottom with clinics. Then they left an entire floor empty, nothing. And then they put their OR on the top. So even as they're building it, they go, we're going to get bigger. This is not the end. We have growth in our mindset. I think that speaks to their whole mission. And they filled it easily. In fact, I wish they built 3 more floors, honestly, because we kept growing. And things were going great. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, cataract reimbursement changed, right? And it went way down. It used to be this is my understanding, you'd have 2 surgeons sitting in the room assisting each other with cataract eye surgery. And you could bill out both surgeons, I think, for the full cost of the surgery. And basically, you're getting double for one eye. Does that sound accurate to you?
I think there was a surgeon fee and a surgical assistant fee.
Sure.
And I'm not sure about the 2 surgeons, but there was definitely a surgeon assistant fee. So that was a thing. And the reimbursement for cataract surgery in $1970, $1980 was $2,000 to $3,000 per eye. And the reimbursement for a more elegant form of that cataract surgery today is about $530 per eye in $2,024. Pretty interesting.
So when they had that big Medicare, I assume, shift in reimbursement, ooh, crunch, right? Because you've built an entire entity with certain reimbursement in mind, and then they completely undercut that. So that led to a lot of struggle for a few years. New chairperson who was put in a bad situation, honestly, not their fault. And it was hard for them. Things were kind of rocky. Then in the 2000s, they start to kind of get more organized around reimbursement. I think figuring out new strategies for marketing. And there's a guy, do you know, Dr. Puliafito, controversial person.
Yes.
You guys can look him up.
Yes.
Say what you will about him, but he is really good at running an ophthalmology department. So he came in and he said, we're going to be number one. Remember, we're number one. We're going to be number one. And he raised the excellence bar. He really hyped that volume up and push. And I'm sure he also hired based on that kind of mentality. And then all of a sudden, Bascom Palmer is number one in all the rankings year after year after year. And that builds your credibility, and that helps you recruit better residents. And then it's sick, and it just builds upon itself. And it's been going since. So that's just a little story about another elite institution, which rose, fell due to circumstances that are beyond its power in some ways, then adapted and rose again. And a lot of that had to do with leadership. Like you said, it all comes from the top. We like decentralization, but you need good leadership at the top. Otherwise, no head, no, you can't walk around, right? You need your brain to be good. Because I just so eloquently said.
I once told John Odette, this was circa 2013 or 14. I told him, John, I'm a benevolent dictator. Meaning, I will do what the team wants to do, basically.
Sure.
I am open to being influenced.
Sure.
But I want high standards. That's basically it.
Sure.
So everybody can lead, but as long as we're all about high standards, it's all good. If we're lowering standards, I'm not in love with that. Yeah.
Right. So it's interesting. I thought it was interesting to kind of learn about that during my time when I was there. And then, yeah, I think you do need that balance. Benevolent dictator, that's kind of what you need. Decentralization with a strong leadership perspective and goal.
Did you know Dr. Puliafito?
No.
He was before your time.
He left years before I started
I
to
see.
go to UC.
USC.
Sorry.
Okay, got it.
USC.
And then who succeeded him as the head of Bascom Palmer?
Eddie Alfonso.
He's the head.
He's been the head for years and years and
Was
years.
he the head while you were there?
He was the head when I was there.
Eduardo Alfonso.
Eddie, he goes by Eddie Alfonso.
What is he, a retina doctor?
Cornea.
Oh, he's a cornea doctor.
Gifted cornea surgeon. He is known for his 20/20 PKs every time. Like his stitching is on a different level.
Have you seen him operate?
I don't want to get too much into it, but he had some health problems, so he had to back away from surgical stuff. And so I've not seen him operate. I think he's doing it now, maybe. But at the time I was there, he was not operating.
20/20 cornea transplant.
That's what he's known for. He's just
I
so
would love
good.
to see that. I've never known that.
Meticulous, excellent. So he has amazing hands, and he's a really good people person, and very good at fundraising. That's a big component to being an academic person. Bascom Palmer runs on donations. We have lots of endowments, and that comes from handshaking and being out there and outreach and working on getting our reputation up. And he's very gifted at that.
So one of these days, I've never been to Bascom Palmer. One of these days, there should be an meeting in Florida.
Yeah.
You need to go and give me a tour.
Let's do it. Yeah. There are meetings all the time. I'd be happy to take you. I get them. I get the emails, and we can go to the Palace. This is the Palace of Austin, Texas, where we're sitting right now at Austin Eye. That's the Miami Palace.
Yeah, I want to check it out. I learned so much when I go to other places. All right, what's next? What's next on the agenda here, Max?
There are models, right, for affecting change in an organization. Have you heard of the 7 S's?
No.
So McKinsey, which is a consulting firm, you hire them to help your company get better, right? And in the 60s or 70s, these 3 consultants came up with this concept called the 7 S's. And so I'll walk you through them. So the hard elements, these are sort of the, you can tangibly measure them, look at them, they're written down. are as follows: strategy. So, what steps does a company intend to take to address current and future challenges? Structure, how work is divided, how do different departments work and collaborate? So, systems, which formal and informal processes is the company structure based on, how do you handle billing out a cataract surgery, that kind of stuff. And then the soft elements are corporate culture, which is sort of at the center of this spoke. It's a soft element, but it interacts with all these other things. Staff, so this, refers to the employee development and relevant processes, performance and feedback. We've talked a lot about that today, I think. Skills, what are the company's skill bases and competences, and then shared values. What's the sense of the organization within itself? How does it convey its shared values to the community? I think we do a lot of that with our commercials here at Austin Eye, communicating our goal of excellence and improving the quality of vision, giving excellent vision outcomes for our patients. So the way you use this is you think about something you want to affect, like some sort of issue or problem, and then you work your way through each of these things to see how they all will be changed or should be changed to meet that problem or goal. So let's say you're having a problem with strategy. You need to sell more XYZ. So then you look at your different components. You just think, okay, if I make this strategy goal, what do I need to change in my structure, my skills, my staff, my shared values and systems, or corporate culture in order to get that done? It all interplays together. So it's very complicated, but it's sort of a way of visualizing problems and executing on them. So I thought that was very interesting, very businessy sort of thing that I need to learn more about. I don't think either of us took any business classes as undergrads, as far as I know. But there's something to this. And I think when you're in science, you tend to turn your nose up to this kind of thing, unless you're ultimately in a position to make business decisions. But it's sort of like poo-pooed, like, don't think about that. Don't worry about that. When I was in med school, it was highly de-emphasized to care about business and to think about the financial aspects of medicine. Highly devalued. There was 2 people from my class that went straight into industry. They did not do a residency. They did not become clinical physicians. They were not well supported from their perspective by the university to help them achieve their goals in business. So I think our whole system is kind of set up as doctors to de-emphasize and weaken us as we go out. So this is something I want to learn more about and maybe see if there's a way to use it here, just kind of thinking about these problems and trying to be organized, more organized in my thoughts instead of just gut feeling. I mean, gut is good, but is there a way to kind of synthesize things and be more organized? That's things I'm going to think about. Whether it works, I don't know. I just want to kind of think about it. And it's nice to have this knowledge.
I would say from your knowing that, I would just encourage you to ask questions if you wonder why things are done a certain way.
Right.
And then that will give you insight as to the philosophy.
Sure.
Because ultimately we're just following certain philosophies of how to do things. And we can go into that offline. But
one thing this is a small thing, has not so much to do with well, in a way it does have to do with our mission statement, is that, things cost money. So there's a new lens coming out from Bausch & Lomb. And I'm sitting there thinking about, okay, the optics, all this. And I'm like really into that. Like, how is that going to work? Like, how do we adjust our whatever? And maybe I thought about the logistics of swapping out our lenses, stuff like that. But I never thought, how much does this lens cost? That never popped into my mind. But you guys are obviously thinking about that because this is not your first rodeo and you have that bigger picture. But because of the training that you get as a medical student resident, that's the last thing you think about for a lens. Like, how much does a lens cost? I had no idea.
I don't know if I was telling you this the other day or John, but and of course this will be edited out. But so when we went up, it was just before you came here. I increased the prices for our premium IOLs $500.
Yeah, we talked. Yeah,
because I just didn't. I got tired of like every lens going up in a little bit, and then everybody needs a raise, and then everything costs more. I said, and reimbursements are going down, and I just go, screw it. This is why we're in the free market. We're just going to raise our fee. This is why we built the palace, so we can command higher fees. And so we're gonna build our own cushion, so we're not always like on the bubble.
Yeah.
Like, oh, do we have enough to make rent? Stuff like that. I just said, let's just do this. But then we've got to execute. That's why everything has to be like good. Hey, I don't want toilets overflowing. I want professional people at every touch point. I want everything looking just right. Anyway, but yeah, we think about
This is obvious
cost.
stuff when you're a business person, but as a doctor, you're just not trained to do that. So anyway, I just kind of see these discussions as very useful, and it's good to see some of the practical models and think about it. I mean, ultimately it does the culture drives the mandate. Our mandate is excellence, and we build the culture so that we can be excellent. And so I think we could probably wrap it up here unless you have another thought. I don't know the structure of the episode entirely, but
I learned a lot from, and I'll share it again. This graphic from Echelon Front, and it was created by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, and Leif actually came here, and we actually had a little post that he was willing to share on Instagram because we helped him see better. And when I learned how well Jocko could communicate and convey a point on how to work with people and be a better leader, that resonated with me. And part of the art is, if I believe something, how do I get my leadership to get buy-in?
yeah.
And I thought to myself, it's really not something I can tell them. So I would take our leadership to these weekend, basically training 2 or 3 day events where you would hear from the Echelon Front team, and they would convey these leadership principles that work across all industries
Right.
and in the military, but they're founded on lessons learned in the battle, because they said combat is just life amplified, basically. So our team would go and they'd listen, and I thought that they would have buy-in if they could hear it. And what I learned over going 3 times is that most people will buy into the principles, but like all things, some people, it will not resonate with them. They will not buy into it, and that may be an inflection point for them actually not staying with you, which is actually good. So another thing that I've learned, it's kind of a weird thing. There's a video that they created. It's called Good. Basically, I learned that whenever anything bad happens, any stress, it's actually good, because it's an opportunity to reflect and get better going forward. So that's kind of how I've learned to cope with the daily stress. I kind of go, okay, well, it's good. This is a time to focus, dig in, and problem solve. So it's good.
So I think we can wrap it up there.
And so we should just say thank you for seeing eye to eye.
That was good.
Okay.
First go.
I guess that's it. That's it.